Garnett is one of our best coaches. Elena, lady in the orange, she's the engine behind of all of this, the transmission. Quite frankly, without her, we are going to break down. Stanley Poppy Smith is the newest addition to the team. He's grabbed my attention a couple of months back as he joined. He had just a natural energy for people and humility. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful for what he's about to encounter on the leadership end. And of course, Coach Vaughn, who's not present with us this evening. I hopefully, I don't see him on Zoom, but he'll be joining us pretty shortly as part of this. So I'm gonna let the team introduce themselves. Pastor Carl, as I said, the vision was from him, and I'll let him simply introduce himself and pray us in.
Good evening, everyone. We are so delighted that you're taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us in this forum. There's going to be a lot of exchange, but one of the things that we've learned from the scriptures is that anything that is worth accomplishing really is hard to do by yourself. It was the sovereign God of heaven said it's not good for man to be alone. He says, iron sharpened iron, that was the wisest man who lived. And we also know that the apostles wished for God's people that we don't only be spiritually strong, but he wished and prayed above all else that we would prosper, be financially independent or strong, and be in good health as our souls prosper. And so we want to see that manifestation of physical health in our day, and that is the vision of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is the vision of our church, and that we are sharing with both our family members, our family of faith, and our community as well. There is no boundaries. We believe there's no limitations, and the heart and the doors of this ministry is open to all people who have a desire to grow, not only in their faith, but to grow in their physical well-being. And so we welcome you, and we're happy to have you be a part of this as we continue. And we have an amazing panel that are here to share their knowledge with you as well.
So I give to you my first coach, Amber Garnett.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first of many presentations to target the 80-20 rule to focus on health more than fitness. I'm happy that you're joining us, and stay tuned for many more things to come.
Excellent. I give you Elena Clifford. She's, again, I said the engine, the transmission. Without that, gear we're down.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to working with you for the next few months as we engage on this 80-20 rule. We've been working on it really hard for the past year, and it's just a great pleasure to see it all come together this evening.
Excellent. And last but not least, I gave you Stanley, aka Poppy Smith.
Yes, good evening. It's a pleasure being here this evening. 80-20 is basically making sure that you're in health and with nutrition, and the 20 basically is the physical aspect, and the 20-ish aspect of it is where I would basically come in, and I will be on the road. So I'll see you there.
Excellent. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman in the middle, his name is Ed Router, Results 22 is the name of his company. He's from Chicago. And I'm gonna let him introduce him. He's a certified health coach, among other things. But tonight, this evening, he's gonna really verse us on a topic called insulin. Insulin is something that I think a lot of us may have some concerning, how should I put it, misunderstanding. And I myself, as healthy as I am, I had some challenges until this gentleman break it down for me. Insulin, how it affects the body, what it really does, what it means, and just bring it down to layman's terms for us. I give you Ed Router.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Really glad to be here. I just think this mission is really paramount to finding out who we really are, because lifestyle is one tool that we have 100% control over, that lets us create a greater level of energy, self-confidence, self-image, self-worth, overall happiness. And that is driven through lifestyle. And it's through that we really can get to our best selves, that allows us to understand and get to a deeper understanding and love with God. So I think the two of them tie in so perfectly together. And I'm just super thrilled to even be part of this team at all. I'm humbled. And tonight, I just really want to walk you through and help you understand the principle behind insulin, because I think if you understand this, I think weight loss will be infinitely easier. I think maintaining the weight is going to be infinitely easier. Let me start by just quickly introducing myself, saying I've owned diet centers in Chicago for the last 13 years. I've owned gyms for 20 years. My main focus is really on psychology and mindset. That's where my strength and certifications are. I am not a certified nutritionist, but I think I know probably as much nutritionally wise as anybody out there. But my real strength is in psychology, because in my mind, the fundamental basis for almost all of this change starts at a subconscious and conscious level, and we have to turn around and start changing beliefs. I know we've all heard that phrase, it's about changing your lifestyle and you got to add new habits. You can't do that. You will never, ever do that if you don't have the beliefs in place that start that to begin with. So yes, habits are absolutely critical. Yes, lifestyle is absolutely critical. But if I don't have the belief and understanding on why that happens, and my conscious or subconscious belief does not back that up, it's going to be almost impossible for me to get this thing done.
Yeah.
Which is why diets in the short term from point A to point B, you follow a set of rules and you lose weight, but you don't change your beliefs. You don't change your conscious or subconscious brain. You don't change your why. You don't change your education, your understanding. And then when the diet's over, you go back to the same beliefs that were driving us to begin with, and we put the weight back on. And it becomes very, very frustrating. So we want to pick one segment today, just the one, and it's an incredibly difficult topic. Insulin is a very complex topic. We're going to try to break down into very succinct sections so that you basically understand this, and you'll start to realize we are putting way too much emphasis on willpower and discipline. By the end of this talk, I want you to tell me that willpower and discipline are almost worthless, and we don't need them. And we don't have them, we don't need them, but if we put these other tools in place, we'll be just fine. So with that, that's where I really want to start.
Okay, and so with all that being said, I promise you we were going to pray in. And so I'll allow Pastor Carl to give us the honor of doing that.
All right. And it's exciting because we start with a word that's fundamental to our faith, which is belief. You know, you will have whatever you believe. And so we see that belief is also important for other things we want. Father, we love you. We love your great name. We love the ability that you've given us to gather, to seek after, and to search, and have the information and tools we need to give us illumination along our life's path. We thank you for this moment where we're having this conversation. I pray that you'll open our hearts and minds. We come against every illegitimate and premature defense. And I pray that we will be receptive. Give us ears and anoint our ears to hear, and also give us hearts to receive. And I pray that when we leave, because it is a process of transformation, that we will implement or we will apply that which we have heard, we'll apply it to our own lives and begin to see the results that we so desperately want and need. May you help us by the power of your Holy Spirit. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And so with all that being said, we're going to have Mr. Reardon give us a short script of insulin, what that really looks like. And then we have a couple questions that the coaches will be asking him. And at that point, if you guys feel free, at any point, you can zoom in, you can put your questions in the chat on Facebook. Don't be bashful. Just put them out there. We will see if we have time in the end to address them. Thank you for listening, and thank you for viewing.
Okay, so let's break this down. There's 4 components out there nutritionally that help keep us full. If we are full, we can rely less on willpower and discipline. So 4 things that keep us full. Protein helps keep us full. Complex carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, brown rice, things like that. Healthy fat, salmon, avocado, those type of things, and then controlling insulin. So today, the only thing we're really going to focus on is the controlling insulin part. I want to zoom in on one topic at a time and really own it, and then do exactly what Pastor just said. Apply it to your life. Walk this week and try it one day, 1 hour, one meal, and just try to understand a couple of these things and apply them, and things will be infinitely easier. So it goes something like this. Here's how insulin works in the human body. I'll try to make this very easy. Okay, you eat food. Carbohydrates are at the highest level. Simple carbohydrates get broken down. White rice, bananas, fruit goes lower, apples, then proteins, then healthy fats. You need no insulin for healthy fat. So whether you're having an avocado, salmon, or MCT oil, the body does not produce any insulin. And you go, fine. Protein, it produces very little insulin to help break down and shuttle things where they're supposed to go. Fine. Now, carbohydrates. White rice or a can of pop. A can of pop has 40 grams of carbohydrates in it. There's 4 grams per teaspoon of sugar. So 40 divided by 4 is 10. So there's 10 teaspoons of sugar in a can of pop. And when I have a can of pop, that pop goes into my bloodstream. The pop goes into my bloodstream and breaks down the sugar into my bloodstream. My pancreas has little receptors on the top of it that tells my body, hey, guess what? We've just had a load of sugar into the body and it's in the bloodstream. We've got to level this thing out. And so insulin comes out from the pancreas, grabs the sugar molecules in the bloodstream, sticks them in our muscle, our liver, and stores some as fat. So those are our storage tanks, our muscle, liver, fat. For our weightlifting people out there, when you add muscle and you add more muscle, you have more storage tanks. You can take in more carbs than another person because you have more storage tanks. So insulin comes out, grabs the sugar molecules to level out our sugar and stores them in our muscle, and our liver, and our fat. And you go, okay, fine, just the way it's supposed to work. Problem with it is insulin's a little key, and it goes in and opens all the little different cells, and it opens the cells and allows fat to go in. As we start eating food, especially overdoing carbohydrates, there's too much sugar in the bloodstream, and the body has to produce more and more insulin. As we start producing more and more insulin, the body starts getting resistant to insulin. So the exact same person at 150 pounds that had a can of pop, let's say use 2 grams of insulin, grab the sugar molecules in the bloodstream, put in the muscles, liver, and store it as fat. 30 pounds later, that 150-pound person is 180 pounds. They're going to require more insulin for the exact same can of pop they just drank. And as insulin starts to increase, insulin increases hunger. That's a whole nother story about leptin and how it works. You don't need to know. It increases hunger. So as insulin goes up, it gives us energy. But then as the body takes it and stores it and puts it away, it crashes. And so as insulin goes up, energy is good. Insulin goes down, energy gets bad. And that's why you see people during the week start doing this with their energy levels, because they're nosediving and crashing insulin throughout the day. So insulin is driving hunger. So as we have more carbohydrates in the bloodstream, we start driving our hunger, and hunger starts going higher and higher. Now we have to rely on willpower and discipline. This is where this gets very, very difficult. Ambi says all the time, eat your fist size of carbohydrates or the hand palm of protein. That's fine, except if I'm doing a can of pop, I'm going to be starving, and it's going to be almost impossible to follow those rules because I'm going to increase the amount of insulin that I'm producing to grab that pop. That insulin is going to drive hunger, and that pop is going to create hunger inside of me. Okay. If I had an apple or a banana, fruits, vegetables, they're complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates, essentially, think of them this way. They have a time release capsule on them. So a banana has a time release capsule. An apple has a time release capsule. Brown rice has a time release capsule. So that when they go and they hit my throat, 1/3 of it breaks down into sugar. But the fiber is stopping the body from breaking everything down into sugar. So we just get a little bit of glucose into the bloodstream. Body creates insulin. Insulin comes out, grabs it, and puts it away. About an hour and a half later, the fiber gets broken down more, and a little more sugar comes out. So you never get overrun with sugar. You never get overloaded with sugar. We have to have these huge rushes of insulin. So that's why complex carbohydrates like fruits and vegetables and those things are so critical. A, the fibers help keeping us full. Genius. B, you're not secreting very much insulin because those foods have time release capsules on it, and you don't need as much insulin.
Okay, Ed, can you say that again and slow it down just a bit?
Right.
I want to make sure the audience caught that last part about the fiber and versus white carbs or carbs.
Okay. I do have a tendency to speak a little bit fast, so hang in there, people. I'm sorry about that. You have white rice. White rice hits the throat, and 100% of your white rice hits the throat, breaks down into sugar right away. The glucose molecules start flooding your bloodstream. Your body does not want it to do. It has to figure out how to level this thing out. In order to do so, the body calls out insulin from the pancreas. Insulin comes out, grabs the sugar molecules from the white rice, stores them into my muscle, my liver, and some is fat. Now, as the body starts producing more insulin, as fat starts to go higher, for that same cup of white rice, I used to produce 2 grams of insulin for, I'm 30 pounds heavier, now I have to produce 4 grams of insulin. So I've doubled the insulin that I need or that they have to have because my fat's starting to go higher and I'm becoming more and more insulin resistant. As I become more insulin resistant, my body has a difficult time putting these carbs and things inside of my cells. And so they keep floating around in my bloodstream, driving hunger. And so as insulin starts to go higher and higher, hunger is going higher and higher with it, making it very difficult to stick to whatever plan that you're doing. So that's why if I add complex carbohydrates, like an apple goes to my throat, it breaks a third down of sugar now, waits an hour, breaks the third down of sugar, waits an hour, breaks the third down of sugar. So I'm having these slow releases of insulin a little bit at a time. But as weight again goes higher and higher and higher, we start overproducing insulin because we're insulin resistant. The cells were so used to taking the insulin that there's too much insulin going after these cells. And the cells essentially get punch drunk. And they look and go, oh my God, what do we do? And they go, well, go get more keys. And the body goes up and gets more keys. And some of the cells are full and they're getting more keys from this insulin, trying to open all these cells. And we start over producing insulin. It's the overproduction of insulin that's really driving hunger, that's really driving cravings. And now you look and go, now you do need willpower. Now you do need discipline because your hunger and cravings are starting to shoot through the roof. Yes, the hunger and cravings are going to be driven higher because of white rice and then dates and then can of pop than they will for fruits and vegetables. But in the end, we're still overproducing insulin. And so as weight and fat gets too high and you start overproducing insulin, good or bad foods that start to produce glucose, you overproduce insulin. And this is what's driving hunger and cravings. And when we can't control hunger and cravings, almost all the other plan goes out the window.
Okay, that was a lot of information, Ed.
It was,
So
I'm sorry.
So let's go into this and let's deep dive into this topic. So I want to start with the last thing that you discussed. Sugar drives insulin, and insulin increases your hunger, which leads to weight gain. Can you speak more on that?
So it's a vicious cycle, like the ad for this talked about and whatever was actually perfect. You turn around, eat food, especially carbohydrates. Carbohydrates drive glucose. The higher the glucose, the more insulin we need. Higher the insulin, body turns around, produces insulin. Insulin drives hunger, takes and stores those. And after it stores those, we crash. Takes and puts those carbohydrates away and hunger increases. Hunger increases. Eat food. Use glucose, turn around and take those molecules, use insulin, and you get on this cycle and you can't get off because you're getting on this thing. And each time you're producing more and more insulin. And the more insulin you produce, the more hungry you're getting. And you're going, oh my gosh, I can't control portion size. I can't control my eating. Then you feel shame or something's wrong with me because I haven't been able to stick to my diet. I haven't been able to eat like I should be eating. I'm not losing the weight. If insulin is present in the human body, you may never lose weight. You cannot lose weight or fat. If insulin is present inside the human body, you will not lose fat. So they did an example of this where they did a study, and these researchers took 14 diabetics and they took them and decreased their calories by 300 calories a day. Okay. And they increased their insulin levels by almost 100 units of insulin. And as they increased their insulin levels, every single day they got them up to 100 units of insulin. The average person in 3 months put on 19 pounds. So listen to this. They're taking in less calories than they were before, but they tripled the amount of insulin they injected into their bodies. And 3 months later, the average person was putting on 19 pounds, taking in less calories than they had taken before. And that's insulin driving hunger. And as insulin drives hunger and stores more fat, become more insulin resistant. Eat food, call out insulin. Insulin drives hunger. Insulin drives hunger, got hungry, eat, drive hunger, store more fat, become more insulin resistant. And you get on this thing and it goes round and round and round. So you've got to be able to control insulin if we're going to ever have a good chance of having a healthy lifestyle. And a lot of times people are controlling insulin by accident as they follow some set of rules from point A to point B. From they follow some set of rules from point A to point B, they start understanding, unbeknownst to them, they're really doing a good job with insulin. They wound up doing intermittent fasting. They wound up doing ketosis. They wound up doing a low carb diet, whatever it was. What happened was the body was accidentally controlling insulin. They didn't know it. And so they followed it from point A to point B. The diet's over. And now they turn around and say, okay, I'll just go back to my old lifestyle doing what I do. but they're still overproducing insulin. And that is something we have to address.
Okay, so I want to talk about what you just said. You said that study you did,
Mhm.
they ate less calories,
Taking less calories,
but they had more insulin
300 less.
and they gained weight.
That's correct.
So
And that's where you start to realize the problem is not just calories. Do calories count? Yes, don't get me wrong, but insulin is a driving factor behind it. So we've got to be able to control our insulin levels.
So I know I'm insulin resistant for sure.
Okay.
And I did this thing last year where I stopped eating carbs. I was doing protein and vegetables. I exercised 2 days a week. I was drinking a gallon of water and I actually fainted.
Correct.
And I was really sick for a while.
Okay.
So what did I do wrong there?
A simple explanation. Let's back this up just a second so we can back this up and let me explain this. Now, we understand that we have a rough understanding of the role that insulin is playing. So how do we control it? Well, there's multiple ways that we can control it. Intermittent fasting just says, pick some period of time. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's 16-8, where I go 8 hours where I eat an eating window and 16 hours where I have no food at all. That's essentially intermittent fasting. But there's multiple ways. Fast for a day, fast for 2 days, fast for 3 days. They're all different. But if we don't eat food, we produce zero insulin. So that's one way to control our insulin levels. If we eat 3 meals a day versus 5, we'd only overproduce insulin 3 times versus 5. So the number of meals we have a day can be very important. You hear this all the time. Eat 4 to 6 small meals a day. Yes, if you're an athlete, like I've been to the last 2 Olympic Games training athletes, if you're an athlete and I'm trying to get you to gain weight or I'm trying to get you to build muscle and you want to eat 4 to 6 small meals a day because you're loaded with lean muscle and have no fat on your body, fine. For the rest of us, bad idea. Because if I eat 6 times a day and she's overproducing insulin, she's going to overproduce insulin 6 times. So 6 times a day, she just keeps producing more and more, driving more and more hunger. And she can't figure out why she's so hungry all the time. She was either going to do bigger portion sizes, drive herself crazy as she tries to tell herself to stop eating so much, and then get really disappointed when she doesn't lose the weight and think there's something wrong with me. This is the fundamental basis of all this. We come back to there's something wrong with me, and there isn't. You don't know how to control insulin. You're almost lost the game to begin with. So back to your question. 3 meals a day will produce less insulin than 5 meals a day or 6 meals a day. Fasting, when we're not eating any food, produces no insulin. Eating an avocado would produce no insulin because healthy fat has 0 insulin. Protein has a very, very, very small, it's not 0, but it's negligible to the point where it's not driving hunger. The protein will help keep you full, and that's in a great place. Vegetables have fiber in them to help keep you full and produce very, very little insulin. But it's carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables start to go higher and higher. Certain fruits and vegetables produce a lot more insulin than other fruits and vegetables. So if you started going to a low carbohydrate diet, i.e. ketosis, definition of ketosis, people, is you take in less than 40 carbohydrates a day. For the entire day, your total carbs has to be less than 40. And once your carbs are less than 40, your body has to use fat as its primary source of energy. That's the definition of ketosis. You don't have enough carbs in your body, and you're going to use fat as your primary source of energy. So it's a low carb diet, therefore low insulin, therefore really good at controlling your hunger. That's one of the geniuses of ketosis, intermittent fasting. You're going a period of time where you're not eating food. Really good idea, because you turn around and you don't produce any insulin during that time period that you don't eat any food. Now back to the question. Wow, am I long-winded? Okay, back to the question. And this is so typical though. In my personal mind, ketosis and intermittent fasting are probably the 2 best diets in the world because they both attack insulin. But, big difference here. As carbohydrates start to drop and insulin starts to drop, the kidneys look around and don't see insulin being produced, and insulin starts going like this. Perfect. We nosedive insulin, just exactly what we want to do. Problem with it is there's side effects. The kidneys look around and go, oh my gosh, kidneys look around and go, insulin's nosediving. Where's all the insulin? We're doing intermittent fasting or ketosis and insulin's nosediving. What's happening? And the body starts throwing out sodium. So you're going to lose 2,500 milligrams of sodium a day. Sodium and potassium are best friends. And when sodium starts to go too low, potassium run down and try to save them. And sodium's going to grab potassium by the ankles and pull them under. And as soon as you're too low in sodium, you have to be too low in potassium. It's called potassium sparing. So now you're too low in sodium and you're too low in potassium. And the body's losing calcium and magnesium as well. So your electrolytes, think of electrolytes as spark plugs. So your electrolytes, your spark plugs are calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. And your body's reaction to low carb or low insulin levels is to throw more electrolytes out. So in that particular case, I don't have to see a food log. I can tell you her carbohydrate consumption was exceedingly low. Exceedingly low, the carbohydrates dropped, awesome. Her body started throwing out calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. She didn't put it back. Sodium goes too low, lightheaded, fatigue, low energy, crabbiness, constipation, tossing and turning, insomnia. All of these things are a result of low electrolytes. It had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with her doing the diet wrong. She didn't add the electrolyte part of it. There's a reaction to the body when we drop insulin. And if you don't put those electrolytes back, fasting is extremely difficult. Ketosis is extremely difficult. Intermittent fasting is extremely difficult. And they should be really a walk in the park.
So tell me this, Ed. So when I cut, because I do intermittent fasting, guys, 16-8. So I eat 8 hours a day and don't eat for the next 16 hours.
Genius.
So you're telling me when I decide to do that and I decide to not eat carbs or limit my carb, that's why I'm lazy, tired, grumpy?
Yep. Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
would not drinking a Powerade that has electrolytes or Gatorade, put it right back, putting those electrolytes back?
Those electrolytes marketing tools are almost only sodium. And that is the biggest one you're missing. Powerade Zero would put back that sodium without adding the sugar. So I don't want to put the sugar back because now I'm putting in regular Gatorade. It's going to add 4 or 5 teaspoons of sugar at a time and spike insulin. Now, this is why sodium is bad, but your doctors told you, and everyone believes incorrectly, by the way, that sodium is going to drive blood pressure. It can. If insulin starts to go higher because carbs went higher, insulin levels go up. Now the body holds on to sodium. Now your doctor's right. Sodium is going to drive blood pressure. Lay off of the sodium. So it's working in it. We've heard our whole lives, lay off the sodium. The doctor's assuming you have a crappy lifestyle and you don't eat well. He didn't know that she was doing intermittent fasting or ketosis or anything else. If he knew that, he would say, you've really got to increase your sodium because of the protocol you're currently doing and the reaction it's going to have in your body. Once that person goes back to ice cream, bread, Coke, get off of sodium because your body's going to hold on to sodium because insulin levels are high. So when insulin is high, we want to be low in sodium. When insulin is low, we want to be higher in sodium. So there isn't this magic number of sodium that we should all do. But without those electrolytes, it's going to be incredibly difficult for her to do intermittent fasting. It's going to be incredibly difficult for her to do ketosis. I can go 3 days of my life anytime I want and fast without 1 ounce of food for 3 days, and my energy doesn't move 1 inch. Every 3 hours, I'm going to take sodium. I'll take calcium, magnesium before I go to bed at night. And after a 3-day fast, my energy is just as good at day 3 as it was in the first 3 hours because my electrolytes are still there. Without those, each day I go, each hour I go, I start losing spark plugs. And the more spark plug,
I was like, what's happening?
and that's all that happens. And that's somebody 16 hours into this thing saying, I can't do intermittent fasting. I'm exhausted. I'm crabby. I'm yelling at people at work. I'm had 5 cups of coffee because I'm trying to stay awake. Their electrolytes are too low. But caffeine is pulling electrolytes out. So the more coffee they're doing, the more they're pulling out. So you lose electrolytes in exercise, altitude, flying, alcohol, coffee, ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting. You're losing sodium electrolytes and all those things. Combine those and it goes too low. That's why you toss and turn at night. And when that's it.
So this is my question. I'm going to keep repeating you because I want to make sure I
Okay.
understand. So if I have a very unhealthy diet, I'm not practicing intermittent fasting or
Fine.
ketosis.
Fine.
My sodium, I should not be taking in more sodium from outside sources.
Absolutely not.
Because it's holding on
Correct.
to the insulin. And the insulin is high and the sodium is high. That's why I have a high blood pressure.
That's correct. At that point, your doctor is right. Lowering your sodium would be better for your blood pressure. But in the end, same thing goes. Where's high blood pressure coming from? High blood pressure, let's say this is your heart. High blood pressure is coming from the wall of fat around your heart from eating too many carbs, developing too much insulin storing it as fat, eating more food and storing more fat and storing more fat. As this fat gets thicker and thicker, this wall around your heart, this is where blood pressure is coming from. So as we shrink this fat and get it slower and slower and slower, we'll see blood pressure drop off a cliff. Blood pressure pills or sodium of those things are manipulating your blood pressure for the time being. This is what really controls blood pressure. This is what we need to get in order. Once that's in order, we're going to be in an infinitely different place.
Well, since we're talking about blood pressure,
Okay.
let's talk about the D word,
Okay.
type 2
Yep.
diabetes.
Yep.
Let's speak on it. This is the Caribbean. You know that our portion sizes are normally a little too big.
Mhm.
And then we go to a family cookout and we
all the
have
trimmings.
baked macaroni and
All the
cheese,
trimmings.
seasoned rice, potato salad,
Coleslaw.
coleslaw, seasoning. I already named 5 starches, guys. And then, I'm gonna add a little side salad because, I wanna be healthy.
Right.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna add a meat or protein. And then I know I don't only eat that. I go back for seconds.
Yep.
And of course I have to have tarts for desserts. I mean, let's
Yep.
talk about diabetes.
So it's the exact cycle. She said it's the majority of people in the country are insulin resistant, meaning you're producing more insulin than you need to. You're overproducing. We produce insulin, and insulin's a good thing. It grabs the sugar, levels out our bloodstream, puts it in our muscle and liver. But most people overproduce insulin because their fat's too high. And then we start making more and more insulin. Well, eventually your pancreas keeps cranking out all this insulin, and your cells eventually just look and go, I can't do this anymore. And the receptors that are in your pancreas are now stuck in fat. They don't work at all. And so sugar goes into your bloodstream and your body goes, go get some insulin. He goes, I can't. They go, why? They go, her pancreas doesn't work.
Wow.
Fat had gone high enough now where it's trying to surround her pancreas. Her pancreas is not producing insulin anymore. So there's no way to clear the carbohydrates and sugar in her bloodstream. She's going to die. So now we take metformin or fast acting or a combination of the two, and we take those things and we start taking pills or medication to produce insulin. And insulin comes out, grabs the sugar molecules and starts storing it. But as that does, it starts going higher and higher, and fat starts going higher. And we think, well, I'll just do more insulin. And we start doing more metformin and we start doing more insulin. So they're just taking exogenous outside the body, insulin levels. Our bodies produce it ourselves. If you're born a type 1, doesn't matter what your weight is, you're born a type 1, your pancreas never worked. So you can't do that. We've had 83 people at my diet centers reverse type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
So you reverse it by just going, look, here's my pancreas surrounded by fat, and we'll just start taking fat off, taking fat off, taking fat off, taking fat off. And eventually these receptors go, hey, forget metformin, forget the fast acting. I don't need any of that stuff. I'll just do it myself. Your body will make it. North of 10 years, research starts showing us we start running into some problems. So we do want to correct type 2 sooner rather than later. Type 2s have highest probability of dementia, highest probability of heart disease, highest probability of dying of heart attack, average 10.6 years shorter than the rest of the world, highest probability of amputation. They own all of these things, highest probability of going blind. They own all these things for one reason. They're producing too much insulin. So the irony of type 2 diabetes is without the metformin, without the doctor giving us medication, that person's going to die because we can't get the sugar out of the bloodstream. But the medication he's giving him is exactly what's going to kill him or her. That's the irony of type 2 diabetes. And so you use medication at the beginning until you can fix it yourself and get off of this medication, because the long-term problems of amputation, blindness, and these things are all coming from massive levels of insulin being produced. And that's what's eventually causing this much lower probability of years on this earth and blindness and everything else. And so insulin resistance is the pathway towards type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so type 2 diabetes can be reversed.
Absolutely positively.
And they should technically not be on the medication for the rest of their lives. It's supposed to just help them, the person who is to lose weight until they get to that place.
That's what it does. Doctors don't have enough time to spend time with people. And so they don't tell them that they've got a choice. This is what they're doing. So I think that's just one of the problems that happens with this. The other thing, a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, for every pound a person is overweight, we judge that around 35 pounds of fat, which is a whole nother instrument. But for every pound over 35 pounds of fat, you start putting 3 pounds of extra pressure on your hips, on your knees, and 6 pounds on your hips. So if a person's 20 pounds overweight, 20 times 3, they have 60 extra pounds of pressure on their knees every single day. They have 20 times 6 on their hips. So they have 120 pounds of pressure on their hips extra every day. And the joint is in there wearing down. And that's why we have all these young people, 53, 54, 58, getting new knees and new hips, because fat's causing inflammation and it's causing the knees and the joints to have all this added pressure. And so that person trying to outrun this thing, and they go out for a run every morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're running for an hour, which does a good job of lowering carbs and insulin, but then they go home and have the smoothie with orange juice and fruit, et cetera, and they overproduce insulin. That's spiking hunger and cravings, and you're sort of giving up what they're doing. They're running on inflamed knees and hips, which isn't good in the long run. And then after the run, they come home and they're taking in too much carbs and sugar, and they're spiking insulin, which is going to cause them to be hungry an hour later. And that you get in this horrible cycle, and this person feels terrible because they're running 3 or 4 days a week, trying their hardest, and weight hasn't budged.
That's a good point to make. You wanna
That
say
is
something?
so me, Ed, because I run 3 days a week, and I was eating 5 times a day.
And so you overproduce insulin how many times a day?
5 times.
5 times. If you had the exact same calories and we forced you to have it all at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd overproduce insulin.
Once.
You'd overproduce insulin once. Same calories. So exact same. So timing does do things. Again, though, if there was all protein versus all carbs, it's a little more complicated than that. But timing is one tool that we have to manipulate insulin. Go ahead.
Okay, so what if I cut out the 5 meals and I do 3? And each meal would have the portions of healthy fats, vegetables, carbs, and I would have lunch, breakfast, dinner within a 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. window. So 10 a.m. breakfast, 1 o'clock lunch, 4 or 5 o'clock dinner. That'll be my 3 meals that has vegetables, protein, healthy fats, and a little bit of carbs.
Then, close to perfect. The more, all the carbs you're doing, good or bad, strawberry, apple, obviously way better than a Kit Kat and white rice, right? But in the end, overproducing insulin is overproducing insulin. You significantly overproduce insulin for white rice and a Kit Kat more than you would an apple. Obviously, I think an apple is 14 carbohydrates and a can of pop is 40. And there's a slow release in the apple. So it's infinitely better for you. But that's why, what you're trying to do is really turn around and do a good job controlling hunger by adding more fiber, controlling insulin. And in your particular case, that's a very good example. She used time, 16 hours, no food, 0 insulin. She did a little more healthy fat, 0 insulin. She can control portion size and eat 3 times instead of 5 because she's controlling insulin. If in those 3 times, she has a banana at every meal, and the banana is older, the older a banana gets, the less ripe a banana gets, the more sugar it's producing. So your grandmother made banana bread with those black bananas because there were like 780 grams of sugar. Of course the banana bread was going to taste good, my Lord. Come on.
Delicious. Chocolate chips in there.
Yeah, I could make some spoiled eggs taste good with that much sugar. So,
Wow.
but that's what's happening. So as the banana is getting older and older, though, and you're putting that in your fruit smoothie, you're overproducing insulin. That insulin's driving hunger and cravings. Now you're more hungry. Now you need willpower again and discipline. We're back to willpower and discipline. So it's not about weight loss so much. It's about fat loss. And it's very difficult to measure because almost everybody just has a scale and the scale says weight. And we just see weight going up and down, and we try to make inferences that you really need something more sophisticated so you can go inside the muscle cell and see things. And they make very inexpensive things you can get at home to check bioelectrical impedance that isn't perfect. It's got its flaws as well, but at least starts to measure inside the cell. That's a whole other discussion, but that's what we want to start to understand. Because if you can't control insulin or understand the effects of insulin, I don't think that A, you're going to do a good job losing weight, and B, I don't think you have any chance of keeping the weight off. And so those are 2 things that we really, really, really have to control. And anybody out there with friends, loved ones, whatever, that have type 2 diabetes, it's indescribable how that you should be more worried or as worried about somebody with type 2 diabetes as the friend of yours that smokes 4 packs of cigarettes a day, because statistically they're about the same. And that's what we really, really want to get to know and understand. And for that particular case, yes, there's genetic components. So some people have to go down to 30 pounds of fat versus 60 pounds of fat before they would get rid of their type or reverse their type 2 diabetes. But there is a genetic component. I just don't think it's that big and powerful for what we can do.
Okay, so let me make sure I get the key points of what we just discussed.
Okay.
Basically, to control my insulin, I should be focused on 3 things. Fasting times or reduced times to eat.
1,
Okay. let's see, a low carb diet.
Lower the carbs, the lower the insulin that's required, and carbs are different, right? So complex carbs with fiber are going to have a much lower carb. So really trying to stick or focus on my complex carbs, fruits, vegetables, those type of things. Go ahead.
Okay, and the third one. So I should focus on when I'm eating to, of course, have healthier choices.
Correct.
Okay,
I don't understand that last part.
so let me repeat, make sure I got it right.
Yep.
Shorter eating time window,
Okay.
Okay.
intermittent
Like a
fasting,
16,
ketosis,
Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
Secondly, low carb diets.
Low carbs, low insulin, low hunger.
insulin, And
Number of times a day you
number of
eat.
times
Number of times
I eat.
Okay.
So if I'm overweight and I eat 5 times, I'm overproducing insulin 5 times.
Thank you.
And if I'm accustomed to that, one way I can start to reduce that insulin is to decrease it to 3 meals a day.
Or take baby steps and decrease it to 4. Remember though, the one we keep forgetting, we sort of slid it in there. We talked about it for a second. As she starts to decrease these carbohydrates, if you're going to go severe like intermittent fasting or ketosis, you really got to add more sodium in. But if she doesn't put these sodium and electrolytes back, either calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, these are going to be very, very difficult days. And they shouldn't be. Detoxing from carbs for the first couple of days can be difficult, and you get that. But the keto flu and all these other things they talk about are almost always a direct result of low electrolytes, especially sodium. So let me grab a few questions here. Other than Powerade Zero, what else can we put back to electrolytes? Fantastic question, by the way. So here's some examples, especially for sugar. Remember, these are for people on lower carb lifestyles, lower carb diets, intermittent fasting, ketosis, lower carbs, fine. Gatorade and Powerade Zero, Propel, all have sodium. Pickles, chicken, beef, or bone broth, better than bouillon. Soy sauce. I sell salt sticks at our diet center. There's from Amazon, they're $14, whatever. So there's all pills that you would take. There's a product called Fizz tablets from a company called Hammer Nutrition. You drop them in water and they dissolve into calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. So you're drinking those electrolytes during the day. Ideally, you'd love to get all your electrolytes from food. But to do that, the average person would need 9 to 13 cups of fruits and vegetables a day.
Which for overproducing insulin, that's
well, and you could do 9 or 12 cups of vegetables a day and you wouldn't overproduce insulin, you'd have fiber in your work. But I mean, it's just so unrealistic. Who out there, I mean, the average person, if they do 3 cups of vegetables a day, they're in the top 1% of America. So asking someone, yes, it's a great idea to do 9 to 12 cups of vegetables a day, but it's also so ridiculous, unrealistic, no one's going to do it. So yeah, would we always rather get everything from food? Yes, of course. Is it realistic?
no.
For the majority of people, it just isn't. But that's where this low energy is coming from. So this is my muscle, okay? And as you start losing water, water's in my muscle. If I drink water, you'll see my muscle fill up and hold water. Without it, you see the muscle shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Now, there's no water in here. And the body looks around, it needs water. He can't find any in here. This is where constipation comes from. Now I'm constipated because my body needed extra water to function. He couldn't borrow it, my muscle. There was nothing there. When it gets so severe, it just turns and starts firing like this. That's cramping. Cramping is my sodium on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 the worst, is a 1 or a 2. Severe headaches, 2 or 3. Insomnia, 1 or 2. Those are horrible levels of sodium. Fainting, 1 or 2. Those are really, really, really low levels of sodium. And they're coming because that person did an unbelievably good job at cutting carbs. And they think it's brutal and it's difficult and it's all things, and it isn't. But you've got to put the electrolytes back.
Okay, so let's listen up. I think another person asked a question. How many vegetables to fruit ratio should they have for a healthy smoothie?
Great question. Couple things. When you blend anything, whether it's spinach or anything else, you take out most of the fiber. So you are eliminating one thing that's getting rid of the hunger. You keep all the micronutrients. So don't get me wrong. No one's saying there's anything wrong with this smoothie. In a perfect world, if I'm in weight loss mode, and I think they're different games, weight loss, fat loss, maintenance. Can you do them together? Of course. There's no one way to do anything. But if you see them in different worlds and you're really focusing on weight or fat loss, you really want to limit the number of fruits that you're using and really stick to vegetables for a while, saying in this window of 6, 12, 8, 16 weeks, I'm really going to cut down the amount of fruits that I'm doing and stick to the vegetables and the fiber and those type of things. And I'm really going to focus for 8 or 10 weeks to drop my fat. Now that fat drops from 40 pounds to 20 pounds, and I've really cut down the amount I overproduce insulin because of the fat that I've lost, now I'm going to quietly start adding some fruit back in and normalize this a little and be fine. If you are going to add fruit at the very beginning, fine. But again, I would perfect ratio to me, I would try to do 2 or 3 vegetables to 1 fruit. And almost everybody in the world does the opposite. The majority of people do 4 fruits for every 1 vegetable, and you'd really like to see 3 or 4 vegetables to 1 fruit. And that would be in a perfect world.
Okay,
How
so
long
let me
to
repeat
see?
that. Hold on.
Sorry.
So we're gonna, if we want to focus on weight loss and fat loss, which is, I think what most of us want to do,
Yes.
we're gonna focus on limiting our fruits
And increase-
and
Good.
increasing our vegetables,
Correct.
at least for 8 to 10 weeks.
And both of those will decrease our
Insulin.
insulin. Both of those are tools to decrease our insulin. Please don't start writing questions about his fruit. He said fruit bad for you. That's not what he's saying. It's dropping our insulin levels because we're trying to maximize fat loss. So she used a tool of doing less fruit and more vegetables, and that decreased your insulin. Go ahead.
And if we decide to still do fruits from the beginning of our weight loss journey,
Because we're all different. Fine.
we're all different and we all have different palates, we're gonna do 2 to 3 ratio. So less fruit, more vegetables.
Absolutely positively. And the liquid we're using, remember, for this smoothie, we're not using coconut water. We're not using orange juice.
Sugar, oh my goodness.
We're right back to sugar. And what we're doing is we're overproducing insulin, and insulin's going to drive hunger. And we're back to using discipline and willpower. I'm just telling you, you're not going to make it. How long do we see weight results change with low carb meals? I think you start to see things change exceedingly fast. My program is very, very severe. So it's somewhere between 900 and 1100 calories. So it's not a fair example, but our average woman loses 21 to 23 pounds in the first 8 weeks. The average guy does 35.
8 weeks.
The human body can go exceedingly fast, but you really, and there's no reason to do, you don't have to do that severe. It's really about making progress in the right direction. That's really what it's about doing. And the problem with it is, if you're just at the very beginning, people get all excited because they lose 4 or 5 pounds in week 1. You're losing stored carbs. Women out there, your max real fat loss in a week, everyone's a little different, but general rule, nobody in the world, woman-wise, is going to lose more than 3 pounds of fat in a week, ever. So when you lose 5 or 6 pounds in week 1, it's because you lost stored carbohydrates, and your brain is saying, well, if I lose 6 pounds every week, well, you can't, because you only get to lose stored carbohydrates once. Real fat loss, and I got to tell you, the vast majority of people can't do 3. Guys, because we have more muscle, we're not made to reproduce children, and our game is infinitely easier than women. You could probably do somewhere between 3 and 5. And so our game is a little bit different. Our bodies are structured different. But when you're losing more than 3 pounds in a week, something's wrong. You're losing water weight. You're losing stored carbs. It's never, ever real weight. You have to be 500 calorie deficit under your break even to lose 1 pound, 1,000 calories to lose 2. So you need to be in a 1,000 calorie deficit, which is a huge number, every day of the week. And all you get to lose is 2 pounds. So losing 2 pounds is an exceedingly very good thing to do. I mean, that's in a week. That's amazing.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
What's safe?
Calorie wise?
Weight wise?
Oh, to lose?
Safe. Women and men. I mean, the general rule is somewhere between 1 to 2 pounds per week. What's safe? I mean, you're saying 3 to 5 for men, women.
I think it's safe 1 to 3 for women, and I think 2 to 4 for guys is very safe.
And that's obviously sustained.
Exceedingly safe. And again, it's a fat loss mode that I'm in for these weeks, and you don't need to do it that way. Someone goes, you know what? I really like to lose weight over a period of 12 months. I'm going to do a little more carbs. I'm not going to go extremely low calories. And that's fine. I have zero problem with that. We're all individuals, and you need to pick the one that does fit you. We just had a guy today get off a blood pressure medication after 27 days. It's the fastest anyone's ever done it. He dropped 26 pounds of fat in some days. I've never really heard of it before. He's the best one that's ever done it, but he got on blood pressure medication, completely freaked out, came in and walked out of there literally a month later and going, I'm off. So is he an exception? Yeah, that's an exception, and that's extreme. And don't think that you have to do extreme. 1 year is fine.
Okay. I think we have some more questions.
Yes, a question came in. What happens if you have high blood pressure? How
Okay.
do you do a low carb diet and increase your sodium without spiking your blood pressure?
I just love that question because that's where everyone's terrified. Fantastic question. If you didn't hear it, he goes, I'm on blood pressure medication. You go, fine. How do I still add sodium to my diet and not increase my blood pressure? You go, simple. when you're doing a low carb diet, whether it's intermittent fasting or ketosis or any other thing that you're doing, when insulin starts to go lower like that, your kidneys are going to let go of 2,200 plus 2,500 milligrams of sodium a day. You're just putting it back to get to even. Your blood pressure isn't going higher. It's not going higher when you're adding that sodium. If you turned around and started adding bananas and rice and sweets and insulin would higher and you added that sodium, yes, your blood pressure would go higher. But remember, that pill that you're taking isn't fixing anything. It's attacking a symptom. The symptom is I have high blood pressure. I take a pill, thins out my blood, gets my blood pressure to go down. Fine. The problem is the wall of fat, known as visceral fat, fat around your heart, your lungs. The wall of fat around your heart is too thick. And that's what's driving blood pressure. That's why in 30 days, this guy takes his blood fat around his heart, shrinks it in half, and all of a sudden he doesn't need blood pressure. So if you want to get off of blood pressure medication, dieting and losing fat is how to do it. You'll never get off of blood pressure medication just by taking blood pressure medication, and it naturally gets better because you're overproducing insulin, and the fat around your heart, your major organs, is what's causing that to drive so hard.
Okay, we just want to make sure they understand that. So make sure you take it easy on us. So we want to make sure they hear everything you have to say. So just repeat that last part again. So what should that person do? They should
not worry at all. Take in more sodium and monitor your blood pressure. You can monitor it every single day if you want to. And that increase, when you're in ketosis or intermittent fasting, I like to see people doing sodium almost 5 times a day. So 4 or 5 times a day. And guess what? You'll find and see your blood pressure isn't going to go higher because you're losing blood pressure because of your diet. If no one else in your family is doing that, they should not be adding the sodium. You're adding the sodium back in because of a reaction to the low insulin levels. So low insulin, blood pressure, no blood pressure medication, you need to add more sodium back into your diet.
okay.
Simple as that.
I think we have about 4 minutes left. So let's see, we'll take probably 1 or 2 questions
Okay.
and then we'll finish up.
What about people with type 2, I guess diabetes, that are underweight? What do you say about that?
Type 2 diabetes, underweight.
Wow. That's a very difficult question. That's mostly genetic. Again, the first thing you would do is measure body fat. You can be underweight, but skinny fat, where the percentage of fat on your body is a little bit high. That's an individual thing. So you'd have to understand that also we're all individuals. So some people very rarely, but you could see have type 2 diabetes with 36 to 38 pounds of fat on their body. And another person next to them has 110 pounds of fat on their body and they do not have type 2 diabetes. So there is a genetic component on where we store it and how we handle it and what goes on. That's a very, very rare exception. But I could understand that. I'd like to know more information on that, but that's your sort of a personal question.
Okay, so that one would have to probably talk to Ed on the side because that's more detailed. Okay, so we have another question. Go
I
ahead.
don't see any on here right now.
Okay,
However,
good.
I know the next time we meet, we'll be going over questions, right?
Okay, we definitely will be having a part 2 of this, guys. So definitely stay tuned. We will also be showing this recorded session next week, Monday as well, same time, 6 to 7. And I just want to make sure, Ed, if you have anything else you want to summarize what we said in a nutshell.
I would like to say, you know what? I'm back to what Pastor said. It was probably the most prolific thing of anybody said anything today. It's amazing. You took time out of busy schedules with kids and family and work, and you've got 9,000 other things to do. And you sat here and said, my health matters. I'm going to do something today. And you turned this thing on. Great. Now don't turn it on and walk away. Do something. And you don't have to do something every day. Pick one day. On Wednesday this week or Tuesday this week, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to skip breakfast. I'm not going to have any breakfast at all. And I'm going to learn what time does. That's how time helps me manipulate carbohydrates and insulin. Great. Thursday, just for one day, I'm not going to have really any carbohydrates at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I'm only going to eat 3 meals instead of 5. And I'm not going to have any carbohydrates today in terms of fruit. One day. And just realize, so how'd your body handle it? What reacted? And you start to realize those are tools that you can use to manipulate insulin. And instead of snacking and doing those things, put a time frame around and say, biggest snacking for everybody's the same, 7 to 10 o'clock at night, right? Everyone's sitting around, they're bored, they're stressed, they're doing whatever. And we're reaching for these snacks because as you reach for snacks and you increase insulin, you're accessing dopamine, which is the reward center of the brain, which is why we love our sweets so much. But that's the habit we're trying to break, this addiction to dopamine. You're not addicted to food, people. You're addicted to dopamine that makes you feel. So turn around and say, guess what? One night, not 7 nights this week. You don't have to go crazy on one night this week, I will not eat after 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. No snacking, no matter what I want or how stressed I am or whatever, one night this week. And we can teach your brain to do it once. It changes your subconscious and your conscious beliefs to say, okay, instead of saying, okay, I'm not going to eat sugar for 30 days. You go, all right, that's too severe. For a lot of people, that's just too severe. So practice something we learned today.
Okay, so I like that. So I have choices.
Choices.
I can choose one day to not snack after 7 o'clock.
One,
I can
Limit my meals.
limit my
From
meals.
5 to 3.
cut down the number of meals like
Right.
you see in Italy and Japan where they only eat 3. There's no snacking in those countries. We're the country that snacks all day long.
We are people. There's studies on this.
Okay.
And then
So
I
limit
can
meals.
cut carbs for one of my meals, preferably breakfast. So no pancakes, no French
Right.
toast,
Cut-
no waffles. Okay, I digress.
And see what it's like to go through one day with limit or no carbohydrates. Because if I can do it for one day or one meal, that's where it starts. You have to take a step. Then no one ever walked 10,000 steps that didn't walk one. You've got to do that first step first and just apply it. You don't have to make it so severe that you're angry and you're tired and you're yelling at people, whatever. Just practice some of these things and start to understand how you're manipulating insulin. Once you get insulin, the game changes. Once you get insulin, the world changes.
Sounds so.
Wonderful. That was an excellent session. I want to give thanks first of all, guys, to Ed. This guy is a wealth of knowledge.
So much,
A
Ed.
wealth of knowledge. And again, part 2, you can't miss part 2. I think that's on the 14th.
Yeah.
Right, Amber?
Well, actually, the recording will be on the 14th. The following Monday will be part 2, which will be February 21st.
February 24th. So my mistake. So again, we're looking forward to see you guys. I see a ton of you guys on there. I see some really good faces and names. I'm so happy to see that you guys are here with us. Please tune in next week and the following week and the following week and the following. We got a lot of great things coming up. And this is just the beginning. This is a springboard effect. This is where we begin and try to help you with that challenge, with that task, with that goal that you've created for yourself. And so again, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. And again, Ed, thank you.
Thank you.
for that knowledge. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Great job.
Bye.
Facebook, CFC, all the folks out there. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Lifestyle is the one thing we have 100% control over. Control it. Peace.
See you guys.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Coach Amber.
Hi,
Thank
guys.
you.
Don't forget the
Bye.
replay will be next week, Monday.
Alrighty, thanks. Bye.
You got these number of people. That's fun.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
gain traction.
Oh, yeah.
And that was
What?
Not all.